All right, hello everyone. This is the Moving Forward Show. I am Sean Say, and we're here with my longtime partner Jarrell Bozeman
Yo, what's up? What's up?
and my little cousin, who is now definitely going to be my talking partner every week. He has a background in anthropology, and we're here to have some fun, and have conversations that move the community forward. What's going on, Brandon?
Doing all right. How about y'all?
Hey, man, I'm
Good.
good. I'm excited. Um, we've been waiting to have this conversation all week. So, this audience here, like, hey guys, as long as you're up for thought provoking conversations, today that's kind of what it's gonna be. That's what this show is. The idea of this show is within the name. It is about moving forward, and to do that, I believe that we have to have conversations that do not have we can't come to conversations with axioms that we haven't discussed. That's what we have to do in this community. We have to discuss past narratives and current things that are going on, and here we are, and I'm very excited to finally have and start this process, and I believe it will prove to be productive, man. So with that being said, I know we talked that we decided that we were going to discuss some how do we perceive the past in reference to slavery, and how do we feel about certain aspects of today in terms of Christianity, and we're gonna be a little bit everywhere, man. And I don't know if you want to start off because we haven't laid out a foundation of how we're going to move. We're going to just allow these conversations to move kind of naturally, as we saw with some of the videos that we share. I shared with you with Glenn Laurie and that platform. So, do you want to start, man, with any thoughts that you have on the historical context of slavery and how we can perceive it or whatnot, or do you want me to start?
I'll let you take this one. I'll let you take this
We
one.
started out okay. Well,
Yeah.
okay for me. I think this is a very important topic uh, to discuss and to have an understanding of and on or whatever. I think it's important. So we know historically, like I've read a lot of books and hear a lot of people when they speak about it, and I came up with I was brought to the conclusion a lot that slavery was like here only, like it was started in America. That was kind of how it was perceived in a lot of the messages from it, whether it was a book or someone that's teaching. I'm talking about in the black community. Obviously, it was kind
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
like slavery started in America. It was industrialized here. It was focused here. It was a focal point here. Please, you guys can interrupt anytime, but that's the idea that was given to me as a kid. And when you take that in as, for our culture, what does that do to us and how we perceive America and what has happened here? We do know that it existed here. We understand that. But
Hmm.
when you actually did begin to research for yourself, you grow up and you study and you read on your own, you realize it was everywhere, worldwide, in every
Right.
continent of the world that had people. And it was a worse result in many of the other places, and this is the place where it stopped first.
Hmm.
That was never brought to, that never was taught or said or mentioned, and I think it's important because it kind of puts us in a position where we can't move forward. And so I guess we can start there. Like when it comes to slavery and in Africa, I mean, my goodness, this was one of the main components of, what was wealth. I mean,
Hmm.
slavery. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to piggyback on that. Like the idea that slavery was the biggest here, was the most prominent here, and it only happened to black people builds this kind of identity of victimhood in a way where you begin to ask these questions of, okay, then why were my people targeted this way? Why was this even, why was this a thing? Why was it us? But I think the opening up the wider narrative of saying, no, this was a staple of wealth for millennia on into antiquity, where the having people as slaves, that representative as slaves, or indentured servants, whether it be voluntary, involuntary, was a staple of life for almost as long as we've had farming and horticulture and the population size ballooned. It was a type of crowd control. It was a way to distinguish the wealthy from the not wealthy.
Yeah, yeah. It was even in other cultures, like they had systems. There was always class systems, and when I hear people in modern times speak about class, it's as if class didn't exist in other continents. For example, like with the Greek, did they not have the caste system where
Hmm.
it was absolute? There was three particular levels of which you could be on. If you was at the bottom tier, you were a slave. Like you didn't
Hmm.
have any rights. It was a similar pattern, and so it seems that the world just had not reached a point where we understood what freedom was. I don't know what we think, what was happening in history, but they weren't as advanced as us, in many regards. And obviously, there's many things that they knew that we don't. But I don't need to know how to build a fire right now with my hands. I can go buy a lighter. So,
Hmm.
historically speaking, with that, it's like we have to understand that that was seems to be almost like a human uh, process of figuring out what is freedom and what is righteous and all these aspects. Because I mean, in Africa, again, I mean, the three main that I've read thus far is the gold, the slaves, and the ivory. Initially,
Hmm.
that's kind of what the main products that were being sold for wealth. And I know it grew past that, and in the future, but those were the main products that kind of built civilizations there. Have you done any? I don't know if you've done any like deep research when it comes to kind of like how the difference in like Africa's wealth and Europe's wealth. And for most people, this is an uncomfortable conversation, but to hell with all of that, because we can't progress anywhere if we just can't talk about it.
Right.
So, what are your thoughts? So, you
Like,
ever did any
yeah,
comparisons on that?
yeah. Kind of piggybacking on what I was saying earlier, the wider narrative of understanding how the African economy, well, the economy on the wider African continent worked was partially due to the slave trade. It They traded in prisoners of war for slaves to produce crops and produce many different things like such as digging for precious gems and things like that. And that was how they accrued wealth. And like you said, ivory and gold. And initially, they had agreed, a couple of nobles within the African continent had agreed to a trade with Portugal for, I believe the phrase was a little bit of rum, manufactured goods and firearms, and basically they said, okay, take our prisoners of war, take our slaves that we already were using to build these kingdoms, and go ahead, go do what you want with them. And then realizing, okay, well, that actually incentivized them to take more slaves and then ship them off to Nordic countries into Spain and to England. And it actually incentivized them going to war and taking more prisoners, which doing that has disrupted the economy of that continent pretty much on into today, into modern time. And so, yeah, it was definitely a big part of their structure from the very beginning.
Now, now, I think so. Ultimately, what you just said is Africans, and did not understand that the moves that they made turned slavery into such an industry, and they didn't understand that it was like you're committing suicide to your own culture in a sense,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
And without understanding those ideas, then I mean, it could be easy for a group of people to be ignorant in a sense, and not understand what's really happening in the bigger scheme of what is manifesting, because they don't know they don't know the adversaries' ideas, and because that's what's happening in the real world. You are a person that has ideas and thoughts, and you and your community manifest these, ideas and these thoughts and live them out and act them out, and they go out and they compete against other ideas and thoughts. So over in Europe, obviously there was another idea and
Hmm.
another way to perceive how to go about and how to deal with slavery, because they ended slavery amongst each other. They made it illegal to enslave each other prior to what happened to us.
Hmm.
So this is letting you know, and it's kind of obvious when you can look at some of the writing from some of the early Greeks or whatnot in the Rome, even some of the Romans. You can see that they were consistently trying to figure out a pattern of development, a pattern of growth, whatnot. That's what I've perceived, and I hope that makes sense. But that's what I've perceived from my learning about the, I guess, the differences in the two continents. I know I'm ignoring Asia. I don't know a whole lot about the Asian movements, but I do
Hmm.
understand that the Mongols were very powerful as well, and I don't know if there's a connection directly to us and Africans, but obviously it would be a deeper connection to us and Africans than per se Asian. So Africa was the weakest continent in the sense of wealth. I don't
Hmm.
know.
Yeah, that's there's really no way to understate that in the sense of they had resources, but to them, those resources were valuable to other people. So silk, gold, ivory, those things were valuable to a point, but not as valuable as, say, tobacco, sugarcane, uh, which later would be cotton and other crops that these other nations couldn't grow. And so they were like, okay, well, we'll take a little bit of that too. We'll take some rice, we'll take some of that, and also we'll take some people to help us grow it. And to those nations, it was, oh, okay, that's nothing. We have a bunch of that. Go ahead and take it. And little did they know what was going to happen later on.
Okay, yeah. So in another way I look at it, and this is brought out by Thomas Sowell. I read a lot of his work, and but looking at it from a psychological standpoint, and of understanding how learning manifests, you know, you learn from what you're able to experience, right?
Hmm.
That's a process of how you learn. You have to come in contact and experience something in order to learn it. So when it came to the African continent, unfortunately, it didn't have nearly as many coastlines, which is one of the biggest things that kind of blew my mind for reading this from Thomas, because he made an argument, on why the differences between Africa and Europe existed. But if you look at Europe, its coastlines it's endless. Like no one was more than 500 miles away from shore, which is significant in a time period that didn't, there were no airplanes,
Hmm.
before the steamboats, before we had the advanced ways of travel and communication. That was intimate to the development of your society, is that you had an opportunity to experience the world. The biggest part about it is being able to go out there and experience the world. And in Africa, that wasn't really the case because of the minimum coastlines or whatnot, and uh, and even in the Nile River, if I'm not mistaken, it's scary, the ways that the waters move there. Like the high sea levels or whatnot. I'm not sure. So
Hmm.
in anthropology, do you have you come across any of that information?
Well, yeah, that's why in anthropology, the historical record that we go by is the that society started more than likely in what's later Mesopotamia, where it was next to coastlines. Like you were saying, there were routes of travel, there was access to water, access to fish, more than likely access to animals. And we start from there and spread out. And in Anthro, we talk about how that is why in a lot of religious texts, there is always a mention of the rivers or near a body of water. In the Hebrew Bible, it's the Tigris and Euphrates, and East Asian cultures, it's the Yangtze and the Yellow River, because more than likely that's where everyone's attracted to. That's where the first farming began. So,
Right. Right. So there was an event. So the Nile River actually is one of the areas where they were able to develop a society.
Mm,
Okay, so what about travel?
mm.
Was travel good there, or I don't know.
Not so much in the way of transcontinental, more just up and down the Nile River, and that would have been the lifeline, the connection to all the other cultures within that area, but it would only have gone as far as the Nile would have allowed them to go.
Okay, so expansion would have been limited.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
so when I think about things like that, it's like, oh, okay, so I can see how they were able to develop, because off of the Nile, not too far from the Nile, right, is some of the early great civilizations, right?
Hmm.
But with the limited ability to expand, they would have had to make the right moves, and I don't know what those moves would have been to avoid some of the things that plagued the continent later on. Because as time went on, the one thing we understand, things change constantly. The world is changing. The geography of the world itself is adjusting, and if they didn't make the right maneuvers, I guess to void themselves of some of the curses it seems they kind of inflicted with their decisions. Enslaving each other is the top thing.
Hmm.
The amount of tribes that were separate in Africa, which you know that's a lot of disunity.
Hmm.
They didn't have if I'm not mistaken, they didn't have horses and those type of animals because of, I believe I read it was the testy flies, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but there were certain diseases that prevented certain types of animals to increase their speed. So their lines of development versus what Europe did was just, I mean, opposite ends of the coin.
Right. That's why you would see, you always hear about the Mongols and everything in history. There's always a joke that says such and such happens in history, except if you're the Mongols. The Mongols were the first like super tribe where they were these multiple tribes coming together and saying, okay, well, we have horses, so we can go further than pretty much anyone else on this continent. If we do this together, we can own the whole, we can own everything, and we just see how far it goes. That's why they had such a big leg up on everyone else. They used horses and used uh, mobility as their weapon, moving forward into the British Empire. They had their navy. They could travel further than everyone else. Most of the time, that's what you see is these kingdoms that do expand and do have these large land masses. It has to be a mode of transportation.
Yeah. Okay. See, they connect the dots. So, and I knew that about the Mongols to a certain degree. I haven't studied them extensively, but I definitely will. But everyone's heard of the power of what the Mongols have done.
Mm.
So it's unfortunate for us though. So how do we deal with when our people discuss this topic and we hear this term? Everyone pushes to Africa to say it was the greatest continent. I'm talking about black people now. I'm talking about our
Hmm.
community
Hmm.
and how
Hmm.
we deal with our narratives and how we deal with how we perceive the truth. Because the things we're discussing has been based upon statistics and facts and looking at the world view and not looking at not being too biased. We're just being these are the facts. So what do we do about this? Because you can imagine the hindrance and the deceit in a sense that is being taught to us from our own people. And Jarrell, you definitely chime in and of how any of this, it seems things to affect people. I don't know, because today is 2023, and I think these are still the same thoughts. I think that, and why is that? That is,
It's a
everybody got to take
that's
a
a
moment of silence.
yeah
It's
that
like,
yeah yeah that's a tough one. It's the idea again. My personal experience with it was that it seems to foster this idea that because our ancestors were removed in forcibly removed from this area, there's this need to either want to go back or idealize or romanticize, however you want to phrase it, this idea of, you know, just send me back to Africa, send us all back to Africa. We're not, we don't ID, we don't agree with, America. We're not a part of America. They don't want us here, and we're just going to go back. But that in and of itself is also disenfranchising and not allowing your people to grow in where they are because they're always like, well, they don't want us here, so we're just not gonna agree with anything. We're not gonna do anything, and that's it.
Right. So it's a hindering narrative for ourselves to deal with, and I understand there's a lot of pride that we've looked at elements such as pride as something that isn't as significant and to be held sacred. Therefore, we would even lie or ignore truth in order to have the pride of who we are. And I can see that in certain regards, but at some point you have to face the reality of things. And
Mm,
some people get pissed off with a lot of these type of conversations. I mean, even if people like to give credit to Africa for everything, and I do understand that the Kemetic community, what happened in Egypt, I mean, those were very brilliant people, but I also see some of the conflicting thoughts that put them in position to commit the atrocities that they committed to their own people.
mm,
And that is complicated in itself because a lot of people feel like because some of the story because the foundation of the Bible, and I guess here now we can start just connecting dots from the other topic, but I guess this is where religion kind of comes into play. Like, where do we look at when it comes to what Christianity has done? There's good and bad, but
mm,
I look at the conflicting ideas that was within the African societies when it comes to religion, and there's such a lack of love, righteousness, and family unity that I haven't been able to see when I listen to Kemetic teachers. They are very intelligent, absolutely, but can we be intelligent and not observe love properly and progress? I think that's the key, one of the elements that is always absent when we discuss elements of how cultures have progressed. I really think that's being ignored.
yeah, I mean, that's definitely, you hear about it almost in a a backhanded kind of way when they talk about, oh, this is some, the moral decay, as it were, and but there's no real kind of turn to address it. It's just, oh, this is happening, and the Bible says it's gonna happen, and you kind of just, okay, so we're just gonna just let it happen, not bring it up. We're just gonna just sit back and just say, oh, well, too late, man. Like, it's very interesting how, like you said, intelligence. A lot of people want to connect the dots with logistics or some idea of what's going to happen, what you should do, what like these things, these actions you should do, but they don't address love and caring for one another and unity almost at all.
Right. Okay. So with that being said, what we'll connect the dots how we may. But so, what do you think then about the video concerning Christian nationalism? I know that's a big jump, but putting it into context of what we've just discussed, which is, the foundation of a lot of the movements involve culture, they involve family, they involve the unifying of people, and like that. Because if you know how things played out, that is kind of what separated Africa from. I mean, or even here in America, that's what would have separated. I believe to be true. What would have separated the two the adversaries in that situation. And one is more united and pretty clear on what it thinks, believes, and wants to achieve and do, and the other is stagnated, separated, divisive amongst itself. And therefore, if you ever go head to head and you're in 13 pieces and they're in one, you're
Hmm.
gonna lose that fight. And considering what unity allows to manifest, so I don't know which part of that what I'm saying here you want to respond to, but it can be any. But I'm just, I see that as a straight line of how progression has happened, how the Industrial Revolution is manifested, how science has become what it has become. Even without Christianity, would science exist to the degree that it has? It seems not. So with all that being said, you respond to any element of that you would like.
I think of one thing that we as a people have to address is our foundation in Christianity was used as a means of control. It just, that's just what it was. The idea that we deserved to be enslaved because many African nations at the time were not Christian by denomination. That was put forth by the doctrine of discovery from 1493, I believe, that gave Spain the idea that just because there are people here, just because there are other people, it is their job to Christianize the entire rest of the planet so they can take as many slaves as they want. They can go take whatever lands they want. And I think first we've got to realize that is where our story with Christianity begins. And that's hard for a lot of people
I
who, yeah, that who feel like that is just their cultural connection. It's like, I mean, it is, but know where it came from.
All right, okay. I'm so glad you're because I'm conflicted with this, man. I'm conflicted, so I'm glad you're there with it. Okay, I for the entirety of my adulthood, for sure, I have been a 100% adversary of anything Christianity. I just got to be honest. That's what it was for me. I was not raised in a Christian church like that. I mean, I
Mm,
went to the church a couple times. Um, the understanding of it was shallow. It was never really deep. I didn't understand it, and so I do understand that control and manipulation is strongly attached to that of Christianity. But as I've continued to study, I seem to look at things a tad bit differently, even though this is it's a fact that that's one element of it. So what do we do about the other side of the coin, though? We once again, ideas went to war, so to speak, in this
mm,
world as we were as humans competing for resources. We're competing for land. We're competing for resources.
mm,
That's what it is. Okay, and what do we do about they were trying to find a way to unify people. Let's think about what the world was like before Christianity calmed Europe down the way it did. Look how it ended initially. That led to
mm,
the Middle Ages, those dark, quote unquote, dark ages. There was an absence of any massive form of religion that first go round. Am I,
mm.
yeah, or is that incorrect?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, a
Right.
lot of things happened in the Middle Ages due to religious superstition.
Okay. Okay. So let's think about this then. So that means absent of truth, it kind of leaves the people vulnerable to anything because
Right.
it is what. So here's how I'm kind of perceiving it. It's like they discovered that without the word of truth or of God, that nothing really will manifest the way they want because so many problems are going to continuously spring up. There's going to constantly be ideas that aren't necessarily good and healthy that will kill you from inside, if you
Hmm.
get what I'm saying. So
Hmm.
what do we do? I don't know how to wrestle with the fact that they utilize knowledge, these scriptures, these scrolls, whatever they were at that time, in order to unify people and get them to calm down and actually develop a society that worked for them. Even though I
Hmm.
understand that it is older in the sense of it was in Africa and there's a lot of connection potentially to Seraphisis. So I'm not saying the name right probably, but I know that there's another potential Christus in Africa. But I think that's still beside the point because we have to look at it from an empirical side of what it was able to accomplish. Because do we get the world we're living in if Christianity did not take hold the way it did? Because it's not as if these things manifested here in America. This was in Europe
Hmm.
in the midst of when Christianity took off. So how do
Yeah,
we
I
look?
mean,
How do you look at that?
I, one way you look at it is, I think, when you look at it historically, the when Christianity was a virgin religion in Rome, initially the Roman nobles looked down and said, okay, there's enough people that are willing to follow this, that for some reason
Right,
they really are willing to follow this. So okay, we'll take our belief system and put their iconography on top of it. So
right.
we're going to use their saints, we're going to use angels, we're going to make uh, Jesus, we're going to make Jesus a certain way. We're going to form him to what we need.
They merged the
And
ideas.
right. And that's how you got holiday festivals like Christmas and Easter.
Right,
And so, okay, that worked. That was a social experiment that took off. Everyone was like, okay, this is what it needs to be. So now you've got the Roman Catholic Church that is can be used as a seat of power in the papacy, and you've got monks that are literally studying the word day by day. And like you said, science comes from the monks more or less than just, a random scientist. Like the idea of the universe was at first put forward by a monk who was then put to death for his ideas, but then later on they were like, oh,
what
actually he's
Arius? You
correct.
said?
The
Yeah, I know
like
you're talking about. I know exactly.
astrology.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I know. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, he was actually because his whole reasoning was just out of the Bible was just like, well, there's got to be other things up there. There's got to be more than just this where we are because look what God is, and there's no way. So he basically put forth this riddle that they're saying that this is the first reasoning of the universe and the greater world, and so he was put to death for it. And later they came back and gave him sainthood, and that still happens to this day in the sense that the papacy actually funded a lot of these research experiments that gave us science later on down the road.
Right,
So that on top of being great crowd control and uniting a people, and Catholic Christianity converted Vikings into what we know as the Holy, like, English Empire, the British Empire. They're pretty much the same people. They were just Christianized in pursuit of trade.
okay, okay. So I want to hold on. I'm with you. I am with you. Okay, so but here's the thing. Shouldn't we consider once again? We have to look at the results and how this doctrine and how ideas, really work. How they facilitate, I guess, this message to the people. Because if we consider like other ideas that they might not been able to manifest what this particular Bible was able to accomplish. Because think about it, we're talking about centuries. We're talking
Hmm.
about a lot of not a small amount of people that was affected by these words and that were able to change their ways in a sense of unity and solidarity and community and let's attempting to eliminate division. Of course, there were problems about how to facilitate the power and of
Hmm.
course that is just human nature, what I'm saying? So but it's like it's as if we advance from simply fighting over land to now we kind of stepped up to fighting over more abstract concepts,
Hmm.
and like you said, the Romans were not initially they weren't initially with it. Once the Christianity doctrine kind of came out, they weren't initially with it, but they had to
Right.
because they saw how effective it was with human behavior,
Hmm.
which is that must be a part of the measurements is considering how it affects people. So like that's why when I listen to current people now and they bring up ancient concepts, those didn't work the first time, buddy. That's how I look at it.
It did.
So are you sure that's an idea you want? I do understand. Like oh, these ideas seem similar, but yeah, but what message does it truly facilitate? Because within the doctrine of Christianity, I do understand what the people did, but what is the word of God attempting to do and to teach people that move them in a manner that it has. I mean, think if you consider from the time we're speaking of now all the way down to, let's say, George Washington and the foundation of America, and consider Christian, the same scriptures thousands, what, 1,500 years later,
Yeah,
what
about 2,000 years
okay,
later.
so consider the difference in his understanding of what it meant versus what it meant to the time of before the Romans accepted it as the doctrine of a nation, because that was the first time a nation has accepted, at least in Europe, accepted a faith like that.
Hmm.
So go ahead.
And you're right. Like this, I think the biggest part of this doctrine that was so different from ancient mythologies was the fact of this idea of like movement within the system you're in. So there was still this constant language of saying, you may not have, but as long as you're with me, I'll make sure you're taken care of. And like that kind of stuff. And then basically saying, oh, God is actually the king of everything. Everything that's happening to you, it really does not matter. Ultimately, I have control over what's going to happen here. So you just have faith in me. And like that was still very abstract and abnormal for people back then.
Right.
And so this idea of, oh, I don't have to, sacrifice something of myself in a way of, especially in New Testament Roman time where it was you giving of an offering or giving of a child or something like that. It was not there was not expressly brought up. So basically to say, all you got to do is accept me, accept who I am, and that is it. And that was huge. I was like, wait, what? Hold on. I don't know how to, we don't know how to take that.
Yeah, that was profound to them at that time. That was like, because that to them, they were still, we were much closer to the animal than spirit in a sense,
Hmm.
like of how
Hmm.
we viewed the world. We were very materialistic, beyond measures. So but there were other people who had similar ideas. I'm not sure where Socrates and those thinkers fall in line with the exact timelines, but those ideas seem ideas that connected to God in a sense that pushed humanity to consider more than just, oh man, I'm a satisfy the lust of my body, like I'm gonna satisfy the lust
Hmm.
of my bed. Like people started to recognize these. It's specifically because the scriptures require for you to acknowledge there is a like a metaphysical understanding to it, and at this time they started, just because of the statement you made, that was a huge metaphysical statement to them alone. That was like, what the hell you mean you good?
Right.
That
There's
so
like there's one God that's like what are you talking about? And then you see these miracles being performed. You're just like, wait, what is happening here? This has changed the whole paradigm of ancient times.
Right. So that's why when I look at it from that perspective, and then you can look at its adversaries. Look at some of the other doctrines. What did the other doctrines say? The ones that were not of the Bible. A lot of those had gods of war.
Hmm.
God of this and that. God of what, lust. So
Hmm.
these elements, and these are the elements that you connect with on a more uh, like you can actually see that, like that's a
Hmm.
visual sensory that you can pick up and be like, okay, yeah, that's the God of that, and
Hmm.
it's kind of like the way that the mind works in the sense of the person who can't think abstractly is not equipped to deal with certain levels of equations, right?
Hmm.
I think that's the same thing when it comes to religion as well, though. Like, so maybe that's kind of what I've come to believe that religion was meant to be for. I understand that wasn't how it was always understood and utilized, but would we get the progression that we got without such an idea of dig deeper? I'm saying more than you can fathom and see with your eyes.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think with the basis of religion, it has slowly become more and more, what's the word, like less uh, requiring of action. In in antiquity, it was you go do this thing. Okay, that's how you get in good with this god or that god, and
Right.
you just don't make them mad after that.
Literally.
With yeah, with religions coming forward, you see more and more of like, okay, you really need to sit and ponder and meditate and almost reformulate your understanding of how the universe works and what is happening around you. Otherwise, you're going to be completely confused.
Yeah.
That's kind of why Western thinkers have kind of an issue with the Old Testament in the Bible, just because it's still speaking in a is using ancient Hebraic semantics for a very logical science 1 + 1 = 2 type thinker, and we're just like, what does any of this actually mean?
Right. And I think that's what I'm glad you went there, because I think that's what, whether Christ lived the way they said or not, I think that's beside the point.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
of and I had a conflict with this pretty much all my life. And now I think I'm getting to a point. I don't think you're ever truly gonna get. We're talking about something beyond humanity. I don't think I can fully understand that within this little lifetime.
Right.
But just in this advanced period of time, I think the information is now more evident. Okay, so let's not get obsessed with if he lived or died, and we look at, okay, in the Old Testament, those Hebrews were required to obey a law of God in the, once again, we said that, like, in the physical sense, in the material sense.
Hmm.
And it had proven to not help people become spiritually moral, right? Because
Hmm.
people found ways to manipulate the law. People found ways, as they always do, to turn things to fit their benefit. But so with this Christ, the Christ figure, the Christ character to come about, and now he has absorbed the law and turned it into this metaphysical, to the pagans easily as this mystical entity, uh, and it's transcended what the Old Testament, it should transcend what the Old Testament meant. Because now I'm gonna tell you how I perceive it. I perceive it as the law was given for those Hebrews to, it was always meant for them to put it within their hearts and in their minds, and not to just
Hmm.
treat it as a law you obey and you can bend because you can get away with it and go and sacrifice an animal, you
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? Because everything, like, we took it so physical. Like, we were never truly meant to go and sacrifice an animal in a sense. Like, that was never going to make you holy. It was the
Hmm.
idea of understanding the requirement of the sacrifice. You already know. Anyone living today knows this. Anything you do in your life requires sacrifice if you're going to be successful.
Hmm.
We know this. Like, I don't care what it is: basketball, raising a family, going to school, anything, working a damn job,
Hmm.
whatever. It doesn't matter. You had a certain amount of sacrifices you had to commit, and your actions kind of show what you're serving. So, I don't know. For me, I see now, I get that there is something deeper involved with those scriptures, and I don't have it all the way mapped out, but I think that that's better than what I grew up being taught, because they were teaching the shallow version of just say you're sorry, pray about it, God got you, going to heaven. What's that?
Yeah.
See,
Yeah. Oof. Oof. Those flashbacks right there. But you know, when I was a kid, the craziest thing I remember someone saying was, you know, God can read your mind. He can tell what you think, and so and that's like that counts against you too. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, I'm 8. I don't know what that means. Like,
see that we were raised differently. It's like I can say, I look at it like we're coming out of the Middle Ages. We're coming out of our dark ages in a sense, and this is our enlightenment period. And
hmm.
it's just in a more advanced time period where everybody else has their foundation already, and they already been through this. So So here we are, have to dig up 1,500-year-old stories and be like, damn, what did that mean?
Right, because even to this day, you go to the wrong person and you say, Genesis is not like a word for word a story that actually happened, right? If you just say you realize it is a Hebraic poem that actually was written fairly late, but uses ancient Hebraic phrasing and a way to understand how we got here. And once you break it down and understand the language and the semantics and everything, it makes actually a little more clearer than you trying to figure out, okay, two people, populate the planet, and how did that happen? Because the average person today knows that's a hard understanding of things. That's a hard way to understand that that's how we came to be from two distinct people. But we do still have people today looking for the Garden of Eden, the literal Garden of Eden. And so there is still that out there where there's two narratives of this whole thing. You still have the scientific, this is what happens period by period, and the people who are like, maybe there's something deeper to this.
And what side of it's obvious that you're on the side of the fence if it's something deeper to it.
Yeah, once I stepped in college and interpret the Bible class, and I was already kind of really on the fence. I wasn't on the fence necessarily of, okay, is this the faith for me? But it was one of those things where you just thought that there's something missing. I'm not understanding this whole thing, because how do we get from point A to point B? And the God I understand also can get to point A to point B, and even show you why he does what he does. And so there are certain things that are just so confusing. And so I had a professor, um, Dr. Buckner, and he broke down the very first story. He went to the board and wrote it, and he said, okay, if you think at any point in time that the entire planet looked like this, and he drew the metaphysical Garden of Eden, he's like, we're gonna have a long way to go. And for me, I was like, okay, I want to hear, because I want to know, okay, maybe this will make a little more sense once he breaks it down. It opened my eyes big time. But a lot of people in the class are just like, I don't like this class.
They didn't like it the way you did.
No, I remember people coming up to me in the hallway and like, how do you feel about that class? And I was like, I don't know. I'm interested. I want to know. Like, we only started at the first book, so hey, let me know what's happening. They were like, I don't know.
So ultimately, what is your interpretation? And I'll give you mine of the Adam and Eve Genesis story. What do you make of it at this point? Then, and I'll do the same.
From Right, and from my understanding, it is the Bible is just telling us that separate from God's understanding and light, that would be Adam at the very beginning, or man at the very beginning, deciding to take, basically saying, I'm going to take control of myself and my destiny, and I'm going to do it my way. If you're separate completely from God, it's going to lead to ruin. And that's where I feel like that's the Adam and Eve story, where it's like, okay, you had all this stuff. If you had already stayed in connection with God, it was going to be provided for you. You didn't have to worry about it. At least in your heart, you knew, hey, you don't have to question it. But when you say, you know what, I want to go do my own thing, now you do have to worry about everything: where you're going to eat, where you're going to sleep, where what are you going to wear, those kind of things. Like, and I think that's just the way I break it down in my head.
Okay. I see, and I think that's the beauty of the poetry of the Bible is that it really can be interpreted in many ways and give many lessons. And I think that's a partial of the evidence of brilliance, considering, the time period in which this was written. I mean, it's still so relatable. But I've learned this, I guess, and I don't know, man. I've been studying the Bible since I was 18, man. I got indoctrinated early with those Hebrew Israelites for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say they give you some good lessons. But lately, guys like, man, I've learned so much from Dr. Peterson. Just a brilliant thinker, and so the combination of things for me in life itself. when you ponder on things, you learn more about them. Where the ideas facilitate from, I would not give myself any credit for that. But I would say, man, when I look at obviously Adam, I no longer even ponder if that was just an individual. I don't even. I can't fathom how the world was created, dude. So I don't go that far. Like I just don't go that
Mhm.
far. But what I do is look at it from a lens of what would be the perfect story to tell someone about how the world began. I mean, it's in the ballpark, man, because when you look at Adam, the idea that he was given dominion over properties of the earth, and he was superior to the animals. He was able to name things. He was able to be in the image of God, and God is this ultimate genius creator clearly within the story, and he splits, just as an Adam splits, he splits, and Eve is manifested. I'm not taking that per se literal, but I still
Mhm.
love
Mhm.
the poetry there. And these two are one, just as a husband and wife are to be. And he clearly was given instruction to, he was taught what to do, or he was embedded with the knowledge of what to do, and he knew the parameters of what needed to be done. He was the one that was given the word of God and the knowledge to know how to operate within the domain that he was in. And he was advised not to go over here and deal with this particular this knowledge of good and evil. So it's already letting you know that it's deeper, because we got the fruit version, but we know now that it's obviously was deeper than that. But
Mhm.
it was Eve who was the one that was tempted. And we can see, when you think about temptation, you got to think about the human body, you got to think about lust, you're thinking about
Mhm.
and then this Eve was not given the same instruction. So if he did not properly convey the message that he
Mhm.
perceived and give it to her the same way he understood it, how would he? She didn't have the same amount of armor, and mental toughness to deal with whatever she encountered. You know what I mean? She didn't
Mhm.
have the same reasoning that he knew and understood to be how to operate within the domain that was given him. That's kind of how I look at it at this point. It's just an extremely deep concept, and it was up to him. He should have been able to protect her. And once again, we're dealing with this as a metaphorical story,
Mhm. Mhm.
and he would have needed to protect her from the evils of the world. Because even within God's garden, there was a snake. So this should let you know that human beings are never going to be in a position where they can't make bad decisions. This should let people know you are very capable of making terrible decisions that lead to your own downfall, your own pitfall. And I don't think that it's perceived that way. We just look at it as,
Mhm.
historical, in Black church, it's just a history story, you know.
Right, and you always hear those people. I wonder why God let the snake into the garden. It's like that's. I don't think that's the point. I don't think or that's the reason. Like you should be afraid of snakes or something like that. And it's like I don't think that was the point of the story.
Yeah, it's not the point. But it is incredible that snakes are still among the most fearful things that people encounter. So there was some extreme intelligence there, letting snakes have always been a point of fear for people.
Right,
And so
because you can't stay quiet. You see them. The same thing with cats and a lot of other things. You can't see them coming until they're seemingly right next to you. So you think, okay, this is a deceptive
yes,
animal.
it's
So,
a deceptive animal by nature, So
hmm hmm
that's pretty. I wouldn't even. That's intelligent as heck to be able to put that in literature that long ago, and it still
hmm
stands to this
effective.
day. It's very effective, man. So those type of messages. So imagine when we look at some of the deep writings of people like Mark Aurelius, or Socrates, or Aristotle, or any of those deep thinkers. We should consider the level of abstraction these people were already dealing with, and I'm not excluding other nations to say they couldn't entertain it. But these are the ones that took the Bible to another level, took it extremely serious. So I think they were wrestling with forms of abstraction as well. And we're just in a more advanced period. I think we can get an even clearer message today. So that brings us, like we've just talked about a lot right there. I don't know what our conclusion is from all of that. I think the arguments we laid out here is, you know, yeah, it was used for control and manipulation, by leadership and governments, and that's obvious. But on the flip side, there were benefits that allowed humanity to progress, because for a community to thrive, you have to have the right ideas that allow you. It's not like it's human nature for us to be around each other and actually operate like a community. That's not what humans are going to do if you just leave them in the damn desert for 15 years. It's not going to happen.
Right. And Desmond Morris talks about that all the time, where we went from hunter gatherer small tribes where, okay, it's like 60 to 600 of you. You can be a little more personal there, but now we are about 6,000 per every 600 person now. So it's not, yeah, that's definitely not going to happen now.
Right. What do you mean? What do you mean? What's not going to happen now? What do you mean?
So the religion functioned as both a philosophical center, but also like a communal gathering place, and it still does to this day.
Right.
But it is so much is the outlook on it is much different because, like you said, we're more abstract thinkers now. So the idea that necessarily all of us will always be together and we're the same group and we'll sit and have these deep philosophical talks on it rarely happens in modern day. We kind of just have that 1 2 hours and then we got to go somewhere. We got to go, pick up the kids or do whatever. We don't have time to think on it as long as we did or speak with each other like we used to. And I think
right,
it would be something like this that would be just leave you with a thought-provoking question for multiple people to think on at one time.
right.
That would be more so than just going to a meeting place.
Yeah, and I think for us now, putting that in context of where we are, and we're not we haven't been able to establish what other people have established for themselves. We know this and we know why. We get that, okay? And so it's like, what do we do with that now? Because when we look at Christianity as a black person in America, then, or African American, depending on which term you prefer, it becomes an awkward conversation because it's automatic, like we're the people that were manipulated by it, probably at
Yeah.
at the highest level. So a lot of people, I don't get this far in conversations with people because before I can get past the second thought, they're already like, man, hell no, that's the colonizer, bro. Like, you know,
Yeah.
and
It
so
can
what
get
do I
kind of
do with
crazy.
that? I mean, dude, it gets dead awkward, and now we can't even have a conversation based on anything because I'm trying to understand what about that word helped them facilitate the ideas amongst their community and then act them out, because we are failing miserably. And we then say, look at what we do with the church. We have church, but what I'm saying here is, do we have it at the capacity that other people have had it? Because I listen to certain teachers now, and it's very metaphysical. Now, don't get me wrong, they go heavy into the resurrection as well, but they have metaphysical understanding and they have certain principles that have allowed them to understand, if I treat, this way, then I know the blessings will come upon me. And whether he knew that whether he's thinking from a metaphorical standpoint or just the fear of God, if he was able to do it and commit to it, he probably manifested a decent family. If
Mm,
and I ain't saying that it didn't go backfire for them or nothing, but I don't know.
mm.
That's why I think it's awkward for us, because we're trying right now here today to get our ish together. So how do we accomplish what others have accomplished without a value structure of morals? Well, we make them up. Do you think
I
we're
say,
gonna?
I'm just like, you don't. You straight up don't. It's just you have to these communities that, for the most part, especially in this country, that have, even in the sense of, rose from being seen as just immigrants, say the Jewish community, the Irish community, the Scottish community, they had to come together under the pretense and understanding, okay, we need to first off make sure that we understand that each of us is valuable in this to make this work. And otherwise, it's not going to. And right now, say that Black church used to serve more of a function as that, as a communal thing to say, okay, you come here, that means you're also part of the community. That means we all have your back. We all are there for you. And that's why you always hear, people, 60 and above, remembering that that area that they used to grow up in, most of the time was usually safe.
Right.
And I think now Black church is more of a, like a fence post of Blackness, just to represent, oh, this is what Blackness looks like, but we don't really engage with it, try to see where we can improve on anything. We just say, oh no, that's what it is. It's over there. Don't worry about it.
Okay, and I'm with you on that. Okay, so with that being said, and we're at an hour of time here. We never decided on a cutoff time. What you guys think? Keep rolling.
I'm good. I'm here. I got nowhere to be.
Okay, because I got a couple other things. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. Okay. So, okay. With that being said, the Christian church today, Black Christian church, is not operating at a capacity of what they may have been operating like 50, 60, 70 years ago. And I think that's in part to the world has advanced to a point where you no longer can just say a thing and not have the evidence and the facts and the you have to advance as an entity, in order
Hmm.
for this to continue to, people buying in, and you need to be, there has to be a system in place. You have to be a certain level of education, a certain level, certain kind of ideas need to be facilitated in there in order to keep people consistently advancing, because that's what they're going to look at. And I think we've we've been failing to deal with the adjustments of what the world has been doing since we got our freedom, in a sense. And I don't know how you feel about that
Hmm.
term freedom, because people still say we're slaves, and we can talk about that too. But um, I think personally, we just haven't we haven't the baton has been down since the time of the '60s, and it's just been laying there, man. And it hasn't.
Hmm.
There's been a lot of crying and whining, and I don't care how people feel about that, but that's just to me how I perceive it. Instead of, okay, now that we've got this certain level of freedom, let's lead our community to dominate in these areas. Or, the church should have been involved with figuring out how to make sure the community was doing well in certain areas. And I know that's not an easy thing to accomplish, but to, I think for a lot of them, they just have become demagogues, in a sense, and
Hmm.
just as the demagogues, the political figures that manipulate narratives for their own gain and benefit. And I think it's a lot of that personally, and not willing to accept some of the things that we've said in the last hour will hinder you if you are the leader of a community and you have no idea of the worldview of what is actually true or not.
Right. And, and I don't, honestly, I've never gotten to a point in, even researching the church to say when exactly this very odd shift from community leaders to essentially figureheads and minor celebrities, and they were really just out to make a dollar,
Right.
really happened. But it seems to be, as most, I guess, well, I won't say most prevalently, but a lot of times, a lot of the bigger figures in Black church were and still are out to simply seek financial gain from being showmen. And I don't know, part of it, I believe, is on the congregation to, at some point, someone does need to speak up and say, okay, but we also do have these things going on in the community, and us just sitting here, jumping around and dancing and singing for 2 hours isn't actually tangibly helping them. And I think that's still like that code of silence of basically like, oh, you don't say anything bad about, so and so, because he preaching real good today. And it's someone just is either like, okay, well, you're not going to do anything. I'm not going to be here because my people are hurting. So apparently
Yeah,
you ain't going to give it to me. So I'm going to go somewhere else.
yeah,
And that's what
that's
we see happening.
yeah. And so that's very problematic, man, because it's killing the morality. It seems that without that God figure, can we as a community come together and kind of operate God like? And my answer so far seems to be no.
Yeah.
Because the thing that's going on in this era is so many people are too quick and too confident to say I am God. And
Hmm.
and that's fine if you're going to put it in the context and say you're in the image of God, but to say you're God, I mean, be careful with that statement, because now one sounds omniscient, and one is unable to be humble enough to be the leader that Moses was, in a sense. And I like we'll get onto those things another time, but it's very problematic for us, and we have to figure out how to wrestle with these complicated topics. I think that's why we're doing what we're doing. It's gonna be important for us to get back into to understand and try to find what it means to observe God. I think
Hmm.
uh, I think we can do that on this platform over time, and no perfect answers, but I think that's what we have to do. And honestly, I think that's what we should pick up on our next conversation, because we honestly didn't really even finish tackling current nationalism. But I don't want to take the time too far past an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got to wrestle with quite a bit. So I don't know if so next week, man, I think we'll pick up on somewhere in that vicinity, because we still didn't discuss Black identity. It's a lot of things, dude, we can talk
And
about.
it's all tied together. So,
Man. So maybe, yeah, we'll keep the show at about an hour in length. It's minimum of once a week, and if we decide to do 2 a week, we'll do that. But but yeah, so let's get back together, man, next week. This was exciting for me. I am a geek for these type of conversations, dude. Hey, and I hope we find an audience that will support us in our endeavors. We intend to utilize group economics. I intend to unite my family and my close friends. And I hope to, there's no hope that we will bring our family back to relevance, in a sense. We're not worried about the mainstream. I'm talking about in the sense of, man, before I die, we should be able to rejoice and have family reunions that actually mean something. And,
right.
That's where I'm at, cuz, and I'm glad it's you and I who are uniting because of how we grew up, where we grew up, how close we were as kids, and then we have that gap, and now here we are, and I think we can do something like incredibly special with this. I really do.
Definitely.
Cool, man. Well, I'm probably gonna hit you up later, but for this recording, you know what I'm saying? That's it. We out.
All right, man. Y'all take care.
Peace.